Namaskar. Welcome to the week that was ending April 24th with Sridhar Chityala ji. There is a lot to cover today and we'll be focusing on three important issues. The first one being COVID, the second one is US news and digital currency and its significance. Sridhar ji, I'm putting up the global COVID update map and we can start by looking at what is happening around the world, sir. Take it away now, sir.
Good morning, everybody, and good evening, everybody in India, and good morning, everybody in New York. It's bright and sunny here. Um, yes, I think when you look at the scenario globally, we are 145 million plus, climbing 800,000 per day, and vast number of that is coming from India. But there are smaller countries with smaller populations, but also contributing to the number. This is basically the daily cases. The deaths has crossed 3 million. But the good news is that there has been significant recoveries, more than 124,000 recoveries. So, the active cases is relatively modest or relatively less. If you take a look at 18,000 compared to the recoveries of 18 million, or 19 million compared to recoveries of 124 million. I think it's the deaths that is the big number of 3 million, but 3 million within the context of 146 million people affected, which is driving. So what are the three major challenges? The three major challenges when you look at it is one is, this new mutation, dual mutation that has come up in India, which seems to alarmingly, rising number of cases in India. 300,000 plus for three successive days. One has seen the cases grow up. The second that bothers everybody is, how many more mutants are to come? And is this a continuum, or does it have a definitive end state? At this stage, the world is not very clear, in terms of the end state. The third issue that bothers people, fourth issue that bothers people, is around this vaccine hoarding and the availability of vaccine. Their asymmetricity in terms of the well-developed countries like United States having vaccines, suddenly United States basically putting up some kinds of conditions in terms of the export of the vaccines, as well as the raw materials that is needed for people to locally manufacture. It's the latest country which is impacted is India. There's few other countries in Europe. Recall in our DGI program, we had talked about Mr. Kono, the czar from Japan, being declined meeting by the Pfizer, who only wanted to meet Suga. The Prime Minister, Mr. Suga, Suga-san, for securing the vaccines. So these are all the developments. But the great news, as we predicted, and we asked the question, J&J is back in action, and at last the wisdom dawned and basically said, the benefits outweigh the losses, and most important, it's going to be also available in India by June, July, which is not too far from now.
Thank you, sir. And viewers, you can send in your questions today. Sridharji will try and answer these questions. And there is a little bit more update that is coming in terms of what the Pfizer is trying to do. Pfizer proposes no profit, no loss proposal to India for its 2-dose mRNA vaccine. Does this mean that Pfizer wants to sell finished vaccines to India at cost, sir?
Yes, that's what it means. It's finished cost. It's not licensed to manufacture, nor is it raw materials being made available. Of course, in either circumstance, you're going to manufacture. So basically, they're saying they'll export to India the vaccines at zero cost, zero profit, not zero cost, at zero profit. That's what it implies.
Now, how does this dovetail into the other ongoing thing where Serum Institute is complaining that it has paid for raw material, but it is not getting that from the US? Is that issue now resolved, sir? What's your opinion?
I don't know. I can't be very specific with regard to whether it is with its ingredients or the APIs that just go into Pfizer and Moderna. There are common APIs and there are differentiating APIs depending on the formulation. Um, the level of the generic headline from Serum Institute's complaint is the most critical elements, the most critical APIs, United States has stopped importing. It's possible that they have diverted that to the domestic consumption and increasing the domestic volume in anticipation of the needs emerging in United States. I don't know whether people are aware around the world that United States is now talking about no longer a two-stage or a dual dose vaccines. Now they're talking about three-dose vaccines for efficacy and effectiveness for a period of at least 12 months. The latest trend making rounds here is that somewhere between 6 and 9 months, these vaccines could potentially wear out in terms of its efficacy and effectiveness. So there may be a booster dose that is needed, which is the third vaccine in the protocol to complete the sequence. One of the reasons why these exports into India may be impacted is as a result of this new development.
And viewers, please don't jump to conclusions regarding this. And we will keep you up to date. And every day, if you follow our daily global insights, you will know exactly the factual position. We are for the best of the world. We want Sarve Janaha Sukhino Bhavantu. This is not a time to quabble. And therefore, please stay tuned to our channel, our updates, so that you know exactly what the situation is. And everything is going to work out. We just have to be a little bit more patient. I'll tell you why. Israel has declared that 100% of the country is now vaccinated. In fact, they are even saying that perhaps you don't even have to use the mask while you are going about. This is a very bold statement by a country that is surrounded by all sides, from all sides by enemies, without, of course, excepting the sea, of course. And they have said that now the whole country is vaccinated and we are moving forward. So your thoughts on Israel, because this is just breaking. I don't know if it is completely confirmed or not, but this is what I'm hearing over the social media.
Israel's both advancement in terms of the vaccines as well as the vaccination programs is quite extraordinary. People have just been very, very collaborative. And the country has seen, vaccinations, 100% vaccinations. Remember, it's a small country. It's very restricted. The number of tourists coming in and going as well is, in these circumstances, because of the flights, is also restricted. But its achievement cannot be underplayed. And Israel has done an outstanding job. They were always ahead of the curve, especially in the medicinal and some of the scientific and engineering fields.
Sir, that is a beautiful bunch of roses you have on your backdrop, and I'm going to try and keep that as long as possible because it's such an inspiration to the sore eyes, And so let's move on to U.S. news now. Hundreds of U.S. scientists feared compromise by China. This rose during the months of November, December also, and now it is again coming back, sir. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that the point here is that the message here is that the investigations reveal, especially around three areas. One is this cooperation and coordination with the Wuhan work. The second is around how many people knew about this Wuhan work and how many people may have been doing some analytical and research work around that. So that's number one. The second piece of evidence is that they've looked at the number of schools and colleges and universities which have received endowment and whether some of the work that was specific IP-related work that was going on in some of the universities, whether there was a compromise. The intelligence seems to reveal that was the case. There was a Senate bill introduced on two fronts. One is to increase the science budget by $100 million to compete with China. That's number one. Number two is looking at all the aspects that where the China is involved in terms of its secrecy and espionage programs to steal stuff. I think we discussed on the defense side the other day. So these are the three converging research points which point out that it looks like United States is very highly compromised.
And Texas sues Biden to force COVID-19 rules to apply to illegal migrants. Why is this even needed, sir? Why doesn't the center want to do this?
There is no enforcement. You see, unless you take a legal action, you're not going to call Mr. Biden's office and say, Mr. Biden, would you be kind enough to make sure that you follow the rules? He says, we are following the rules. Then, the Texas and Arizona will say, you're not following the rules. Those guys, there's nobody in the border. They're all coming into the country. So they necessarily have to, file a case and see whether they can enforce it through the courts. And court enforcement is monitored. The challenge comes in, they have already resource starved. So the question, therefore, is how do you deal with, you have dismantled ICE to be a much more monitoring organization inside the state rather than at the borders. So it's very challenging. So they see the Republican states or the states which are impacted adversely, they don't see any other way other than through a court process to address their grievance.
Sir, keep continuing for a second. The border surges, like you said, are continuing unabated. And now Louisiana leads 10-state lawsuit against Biden climate order. So, everything that the executive orders are being issued by the president is now being challenged by some of the states, sir.
It is. Now, just to get back, the border surges have increased. Then you have Texas, and there may be other states, including Arizona, filing a suit in terms of not just the compliance around the following the COVID protocols. Remember, we also had the withdrawal of the security, screening of the people, and we were letting people in. So we have another set of actions going on that aspect in the border. Then now we find that it is illegal. We can't use the word illegal. I use the word legally illegal migrants, or you can say, aspiring migrants coming in. They are all being funded. And so therefore there's no disincentive. So the latest breaking news as I come into the show is many of these people who are sitting inside, who originally had an eviction order to leave the country, are now saying they're not going to leave the country. So you have a swag of issues, since you said continue on this point, you have a swag of issues around the border. So this is going to be one of the big issues that United States is going to face on the economic, security, and potentially rising COVID. What you are seeing in India, we may soon be seeing, because we have seen, you can see the number, it's 46,000. We discussed it. I think some numbers are telling us that maybe our charts are a little bit, has actually gone to 62,000. So where is these numbers coming from? These numbers are coming from many people creeping in who have not been tested. So we have a big problem on the border. With regard to Louisiana, so you have this new climate accord bill, right? You have two things. One is, banning the fracking. Number two is not allowing leasing of new land or water for oil drilling. You have that has an economic consequence. You have selective number of existing projects being suspended. Keystone pipeline being suspended. So what these 10 states are saying is, you have no business, there is no justification to say that a climate accord that you have reached binds us into this agreement to which we are not a party. We have an economic loss originating from this. There's no compensation mechanism. So therefore, you are infringing on the rights as well as the responsibilities that is enshrined to a state in the Constitution. That's what this litigation is about.
And now Biden pledges that US will lead the world to decarbonize industries. And again, I'll just add one more comment from Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, who says it's an enormous mistake to see climate change as the main problem when you have a raging pandemic on your hands. I'm really not understanding what this priority is, sir.
If you go back and look at our Thursday Daily Global Insight show, I am certain that Mr. Pompeo, a good friend, has watched our program, because we raised this issue in the concluding comments, which is to say, would you like to have a world climate summit, or would you like to have a world emergency summit on COVID, vaccinations, funding of some of these smaller nations which are economically distressed, which can walk into the trap of China in terms of the debt, debt vaccination, debt economics, anything that's associated with debt, China is ready to step in, policies. So he's making a right observation. Why is this priority on putting the climate summit ahead of a pressing issue that is confronting the world? So therefore, I'm with you on this. And I think Mr. Pompeo is also watching some of our programs, or at least, when we tweet something, then he's picking up and watching it. So that's very good news.
Well, in India, they used to say what is called as Konar notes in Tamil Nadu, which is for cheat sheet kind of thing. And here in US, it's called, I think, Cliff's Notes. So perhaps the congressmen and women and the senators, and who knows, even the White House is looking at DGI for all their things to prepare for and against. So at least that way we have bipartisan support, sir.
Very good, very good. No, I think that the news is heard and they can use it whichever way they want. Again, on this specific, not to digress, to be on the same topic, China has now issued, again, walking into the show, China has now issued a statement that it will not change its course in terms of its obligations to meet decarbonization or the EPA guidelines. So United States goes on putting money and China will go on puffing. So the question, therefore, is there ends the climate accord. There ends the climate accord.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, sir.
There ends the climate accord. So I think that this whole thing is a shimazu.
And President Biden is planning his first overseas trip to UK and Brussels. And this has been announced now. What do you think is going to be on his agenda, sir?
NATO, climate accord, NATO, and broad social embracement of inclusiveness, this, that, open borders, immigration, you got to take more people in. This is what it is. He is meeting the EU leaders along the sidelines of his meeting NATO. This is after the G7 meet. The G7 meet, is with UK is the host for the G7. I don't know whether it's G7 plus 3. Originally, G7 plus 3 was planned, where Japan, Korea, Australia, and India were the other invitees to G7 meeting. Whether it's going to be the same G7 plus 3, we'll know soon. So after that meeting, he's meeting the EU leaders. He's also meeting the NATO. So those are the objectives, sir.
And in global news, Israel now says it was not a Syrian missile and it was not an attack on Israeli nuclear reactor. So I am a little confused. Usually why would Israel want to put a bomb on its own land? No. So it has to be from somewhere else. If not Syria, where do you think it emanated from?
No, I think that we discussed this. We said we have not heard the last word. So we now have heard the last word when we finish the Thursday program. So the last word is that it was a misfire from a specific missile launcher, and from Syria. Israel took out that launcher, plus obviously they attacked some other sites which we don't know of. and there's no news on that. So Israel has acknowledged that the nuclear reactor was not targeted, nor there were any type of explosions that occurred near the site as a result of some activity, but it is from a misfired missile from one of those non-working launchers in Syria. So that is the final clarification, and I think this matter will now come to a close.
And in some sad news, the submarine that had sunk off of the coast of Indonesia has now officially been declared sunk, which means the unfortunate sailors stuck in it are presumed dead now. So, your thoughts, our thoughts and prayers go out to all the families who are getting this news, and it's very, very sad day, sir.
It's a very sad day, and it also reinforces, if it is not reinforced already, in multiple and many ways, that the Indonesian archipelago is not very trivial. There's several planes, several ships that have disappeared in the archipelago, and hardly few have been ever traced. The last one was the big Malaysian airline that went under. There's so many theories that shot up, and it's not traced. And I think it is possibly one of these undercurrents. They tell me that in some of these Indonesian seas, it's like layers and layers. So you have almost like cities with forests, and below that another layer. So it is a very what you call extraordinary archipelago with waters which are deep, and many instances they are non-reachable in conventional ways because of the depths they are. So many, at least U.S., India, and even other foreign navies, tries to send some ships to look to help in the location, but all of no avail.
And Japan, US, France are set for military drills off Kyushu in May, sir.
Well, I think this is another very interesting, because as you can see that around the South China, East China, the Taiwan Strait, there is a lot of activity going on, and there is very close coordination. When I look at the Japan, US, France, or when I look at Japan, India, France, or when I look at Japan, India, France, Australia, when I look at Japan, Germany, now this is the latest edition, Japan, US, and France, what you observe is very clear that Japan is emerging as one of the lead anchors. Then from away from the region, France has clearly emerged. Again, we talked about this in the DGI program. France has emerged as one of the most interesting, assertive, and committed countries to be a player. For whatever reasons, Britain was one of the early committers to this what you call a defense engagement, but probably because of COVID or some other reasons, they're a little bit behind, both UK and Germany.
Sir, someday you and I, maybe in the next few weeks, do a special session on the rise of France under Emmanuel Macron. Remember, he was a very moderate candidate when he assumed the reins, and what you see today of France is it's a drastic transformation. We hope to have a special segment on this. Stay tuned, gentlemen and ladies, and we'll go on to the next news, which is Australia now firing back, saying that they will not surrender to Beijing. This is their defense minister.
I think that there's been a lot of exchange of words. Defense minister has stepped in and said we are not an outpost. In fact, went on to say we are not an outpost. We are not here for taking. We will defend every inch of our land. And there must have been some, local skirmish, exchange of words, and that prompted the defense minister. Or there may have been some threat that was looming. But this is the first time I'm seeing. First time. I think we mentioned this under Scott Morrison. Australia clearly demonstrating its assertive and leadership both on protecting the region, but as well as defending the sovereignty of its borders.
This next news item is going to be interesting. Baltics expel Russian diplomats, and Russia returns or retaliates by expelling Polish diplomats. Baltics versus Polish. I'm trying to make some sense here.
You're making
Poland is not a Baltic state, isn't it?
No, Poland is not a Baltic, but what's happening is the Baltics expel the Russian diplomats as a reciprocal gesture to what happened with the Czech. If you remember that the Czechs expelled, what's going on with Poland? So it seems like this infection, like COVID, spreads, and so Polish diplomats were expelled by the Russians, and so Russians have now expelled the Polish diplomats. So what is going on is there's a series of activities which is around that Eastern Bloc. They all seem to be interconnected, and there's one common theme that has emerged. Russia seems to be spying, using its embassies on spying on all these Eastern states, and they all are now intertwined in expelling each other.
Interesting. And Taiwan is now in talks. Taiwan is now in talks with over creating travel bubbles with countries such as Singapore, Philippines, Vietnam, and Guam. So this bubble thing is again back, country to country only flights, sir.
The reason is that the world is shut off. Many people can't travel to many destinations. You know, Japan has emergency in Tokyo and Osaka. The Olympics itself is in Summer Olympics itself is in question. So Taiwan is a very, very active business hub. Singapore is a very active business hub. Vietnam is a very active business hub. Philippines is joining the fray. So they're suggesting, and Guam is, both tourist as well as, like an investment destination. So people are, at least these countries, little countries are saying, look, people have to get out some way. And the business people have the opportunity to get out and engage in business as well. So Singapore is the eco center for some of the trading activities that takes place. So they're coming with a concept whether they actually can create bubbles within that perimeter. And remember, all of these countries are ASEAN countries, so which also makes it appropriate to see. You start, and then Indonesia is still not in picture. Thailand is not yet in picture. Malaysia is not yet in picture. So you still have the bigger population countries out of the picture, at least to see whether they can get going on this.
And mom and pop stores are at the center of India's $850 billion digital revolution or retail revolution. So does that mean that Amazon is not eating into mom and pop stores' lunch?
Recall, we talked about Amazon setting aside $250 million to set up venture capital investing into some of these mom and pop of the shops, basically to encourage them to embrace the e-commerce. I think what you are witnessing is what India missed to be a global player in the textile industry. Right? India should have consolidated, had the largest pool of tailors in the world. You go to every village, you have 1% tailor, 3% tailor, 2% tailor. It never consolidated that as was done by some of the other countries, including China. I think that they missed the bus in that process. Here, at least, you have these small stores which are all over, from rural to semi-urban areas. They all are being retooled or enabled to be part of the retail revolution that is coming in India, because e-commerce has been embraced. So this is a good thing. If it's an $850 billion, the numbers that I have seen by 2030 is about $1.3 to $1.4 trillion that make up. So $1.3 to $1.4 trillion of e-commerce coming from these mom and pop shops out of this target of the $5 trillion that they have is a 20% contribution to the economy, sir. And that should not be a surprise to anybody, because the reason is all the consumption happens in these semi-rural areas where there's probably 50% or more than 55% of the population is. That's where the consumption occurs. And the same mom and pop shops were used by Modi's government Modi ji's government when they did the distribution of all this food during the COVID-1 in India.
I think that's going to be repeated again. That's what I'm hearing. About 25,000 crores has been set aside for 2 months, I believe. India is going to be supplying grains free to a certain category of eligible families and households. And this will, again, we will add more information over the next week as we get more information. So now let us go to the third important topic that we were going to discuss about, which is the digital currency and what it means to you. So from my little information bubble, I'm going to say a few things, sir. You are the expert in this and you can correct me, but I'm just going to set the context here. Viewers, you have been seeing that the digital currency is beginning to gain a lot of traction. You have countries like US and India still sitting on the sidelines in terms of a country policy, whereas there is strong support for digital currencies from countries like China, Japan, and a whole bunch of Southeast Asian countries. Now, I'm not going to name every one of them, but there are a lot of countries, and they are also significant trade partners. Now, here's the interesting thing. Now, last week, the Bitcoin is now ended at $50,000, and Coinbase, which went public just last week, I think, or 10 days ago or something like that, is now at $291.60. It was, I think it started at 348 or something like that. So it's already lost about 15% or something around that part, that point loss in value. Now, the lowering of these prices would actually be counterintuitive in my opinion, and if you'll please hear me out when I say why I say that, because the US stock market had a fall because President Biden said that he was going to raise long-term capital gains tax to 43.4% from the existing 20%. So this goes from here, it's going up there. Now, because of that, a lot of stocks fell by at least 400 points one day, and then it settled at down 300. Yesterday again, it gained most of that back. But so there is a certain amount of churn. Now, the wisdom then would be is people would want to take their money that would effectively qualify for long-term capital gains or whatever and put that in digital currency. If that had happened, then the digital currency should have gone up, not down. So there is something that I'm trying to understand here. I'm not an expert here. To unravel this and to give the significance. Should you buy Coinbase? Should you buy Bitcoin? And again, we are not going to tell you yes or no. All we are going to tell you is the pluses and minuses and the trends, and you have to make your own decisions. We are not responsible for any loss or gain out of this transaction that you may undertake. Sir, take it away and explain to us, give us a gyan on digital currencies.
Great. Just to reaffirm Sreeji's point, the compliance disclosure is, we are not, all this information is purely our individual opinions. They are not to be used for any commercial decision-making purposes. And you can use our, I think is one more research in your cogwheel. So that is the compliance because, there's broker-dealer stuff, etc. So we won't go into all of that. Now, first and foremost, why there is, I am a believer, so I will say this, I am a believer that the digital currency is here to stay, okay, is here to stay. Why it is here to stay? The number 2, number 3 economy in the world today are behind it. Who is number 2 and who is 3? Number 2 is China, and number 3 is Japan. They're clearly behind it. And they're trying to create small exchanges and around the Southeast Asia and Asian region. Now, why they're creating it? They see this as an important vehicle to do government-to-government type of trade in a very less disruptive way without being dependent on a third currency that is called US dollar and the price variations, the subjective price variations going on. China is trying to woo these smaller nations when I say smaller, the Japan and the adjacent nations, to say and join its digital platform. I doubt very much whether they will do it. China's objective, when it's April 5th, April 6th, earlier this month, made a specific announcement. It wants to be using, they don't want to be using renminbi either, because again, it's subjects. So it says a China issued digital currency, you buy it, either you buy it through commodity, you supply me so much, I'll credit so much into your account. Okay, I buy something from you, we determine, then I deduct something from you. So this whole block ledger concept and the trading with this digital currency does not actually exchange value in a real context, in a bank to bank, but it simply reduces the relative holdings. So to me, the digital currency, government to government, will be the first manifestation. It's conceivable it will start in Asia. Asia will be by 2030 close to 40% of the GDP. By the time you get to 2050, we have given all these numbers, 54 to 56% of the global GDP will be in Asia. So there is going to be no US dollar, and there is going to be a digital currency, whether it is a renminbi denominated, Japanese yen denominated, Asian currency unit denominated, digital currency comes into play. We're going to see that. That's the first answer. As far as the second answer is concerned, that there is a specific market segment that looks at this. People don't, I'm sure they know. There's what you call as the alternate asset or alternate class. So you have all these heritage and photographs and all these rare arts, etc. So people, a lot of the rich people make investments, and that's a very big business between Europe, United States. I don't know the size in Asia. Clearly in Europe and the United States is a very big business. You're going to see some of these transactions happening in the digital currencies. Then you're going to have business to government contracts. If you're dealing between Taiwan and Japan or Taiwan and Vietnam, you may begin to see some of the government to business and business to business transactions happening in the digital currency, a delinked currency, a delinked from a third currency where you set the base prices on some other kind of a currency, such as a US dollar. Tesla has already, Amazon had experimented before. Tesla has already announced that it is going to be, especially with its dealers, because that's a business to business. Tesla is, procurement happens with Tesla with either the Japanese government or the Singapore or the Vietnam government. That's a government to business types of transaction. So you're going to see some volume of activity. These are high value, low volume transactions. These are not retail transactions. Retail transactions are low value, high volume transactions. I don't think we will see the retail transactions, which are low value transactions, happening in the digital currency market. So where does that bring it to? Your the next question, which is namely the fluctuation of this digital currency is a matter of demand and supply. And you may begin to see price variations and price movements going up as a result of that. Okay, so will it be $200,000 one day? Possibly. It's not going to be going down dramatically to the numbers that people are. It's going to. Well, it may crash just as every other market. Gold has crashed, any commodity. So to me, the cryptocurrency is being treated today as a separate asset class. At some stage, it may become part of the asset class called commodity. So that's my other kind of prediction. So where does this take us to coin, which is the Coinbase? There is going to be a need for certain categories of people. There may be very small set of people, okay, maybe 1% of the universe, 2% of the universe. I will also say my son, for example, keeps his currency in US dollar crypto. Then he goes to Australia. Then what he does, he sells some US dollar and then gets it
in Australian dollar. So in other words, he's selling his crypto in a crypto $1 exchange and then getting an Australian dollar liquid cash. So you find a small segment of the population. So you would need an exchange where a global exchange which is able to redeem cash for you and put it into your wallet or purse in the local currency. So therefore, that specific market, I told you it's retail transactions, is very small. It's not going to take off, but you need exchanges to facilitate that. So this is where Coinbase fits in. They have seen demand, they have seen surges. It's now running into a few $1 billion. Nothing prevents it from growing even much, much higher. It's anonymous and it is secure and it is convenient. It stops the gyrations. So hence, whether you choose to buy or not, I see Coinbase, going up, probably doubling in value. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So be it. I made the call. Sooner or later. And the base price, if you recall, the base price was set at $350. And then what happened was they started to trade, went into $338, $340. It's now back to $290, $160. As Sree did a quick arithmetic, you still have a locked up gain of minimum 15% if you're buying at $290 right now.
One can think of it as a good entry point. Thank you very much, Sridharji. You have actually laid out the roadmap of digital currency as you, a banker, sees it. But we have to keep in mind that bankers are the ones most threatened by this digital currency. The traditional concept of
central bankers, clarification, central bankers.
Yes, I stand clarified. So they now are going to become more and more irrelevant and let the market determine what should be the exchange rates and what should be the mechanism by which people have to buy and sell. We are going to go into some interesting times in the future, but I have not seen such a detailed explanation, and I've been a keen student of this digital currency, and because I viewers may know, I have a few intellectual property, I have a few patent applications in fintech, and these are all beginning to come out of the tunnel in one form or the other. And these have nothing to do with actual currencies. This has got to do with the technology, what I like to call as digital ledger technology. And that's for a different application, different purpose. But see, what happens is if government to government transactions start taking place, then government start seeing the efficiencies of this transfer. And then perhaps Indian central government might start transferring the thing to state governments in the same way, because you want to try and lower the leakage.
Exactly. Lower.
Right?
See, cost of money transmission is expensive. You see, when you have to take up money from a bank account and put that money into another bank account is very expensive. And every time such a transaction occurs, there is a third institution that is involved that's called the central bank, which deals not just simply in the accounts being debited, but also involved in, hey, when the money was taken out of the bank, is this bank capable of meeting the obligation of settlement, or it is got too much money pulled out or too less money pulled out? You don't have these issues with a crypto, because the reason is a crypto is a crypto and it has a defined value. The value doesn't disseminate. There is no kind of central bank involved. There is no risk involved. The currency has defined value. Whereas in the case of a settlement, the currency is fixed. But I may not have enough money sitting in my system until all other people give me the money that they owe me. If some of them fail, then I don't have the money. So there is that intricacy of cost and risk when a liquid currency is involved in basically conducting trade and commerce.
Thank you once again, Sridharji, for that explanation. And viewers, now we are going to start taking your questions. Sridharji, my first question to you is from a paid member. Sachin Sharma wants to know, how do you see this India-US relation turning sour because of US blocking raw materials of COVID vaccine Novavax. Lots of growing criticism in India day by day.
Well, I think the Modiji has conducted his diplomacy in a very strategic manner. He doesn't take any single issue as the issue which is a showstopper. This is on the relationship side. As far as see, right now you can see in many of the instances, once upon a time there used to be every day a statement between Trump and Modi around the strategic nature of the partnership. That has disseminated. Obviously, there is a change in the government. There's a different in mindset. There's a policy. But again, when you take a look at the most recent press statement around the energy summit, Modiji went out of the way and say, I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder with Mr. Biden in meeting the climate targets as well as to meet the EPA guidelines. And, we are already far ahead of the game. So you may see selective collaboration, and you may also see some areas where they may not agree. So that is the nature of the global diplomacy. As far as the imports is concerned, I think that what you will see is that India may say, okay, you want to give Pfizer at no cost, we'll take it. J&J, you want to come in and manufacture here, you do it. Knowing and seeing what's happening with Mr. Modiji, India is going to develop its own ingredients within its borders, and you may see more than one, not just Covaxin. You may see variants of Covaxin coming in with indigenous materials or materials sourced from countries outside of United States.
And Nitin Vishwa wants to know, how much will digital currencies like Bitcoin be useful to the world? In my opinion, will it not wipe out the economies of countries such as Singapore or UAE? Singapore or UAE?
Remember, it's a government to government. It's not a retail currency. It's a government to government transaction. So therefore, it will not spill into the world of retail and the world of daily kind of transactional kind of commerce. It's not going to wipe out the banking system. It is for high value, low volume transactions where many of the participants don't participate. Right? If there is for example, China and Iran, I am buying $250 billion of oil. They can't do US dollar because it is banned. He doesn't want to renminbi, so he issues a digital currency. So then Iran sources some other stuff from China, and they diminish the value of the renminbi dominated crypto. And so therefore this doesn't come into the mainstream banking system. So countries are not going to be destroyed. They may not be able to use that currency with Japan. So that's where the intercurrency hubs is what China is trying to push. But given the Chinese nature, there is inherent suspicion whether you want to be linked. But there will be digital currency hubs like Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, Vietnam may come together and create a hub where you have settlement happening or recognition of the digital currencies which are linked to the specific, whether it is Korean won or whether it is to Singapore dollar or whether it is to Vietnamese dollar. Any of these things, you may find that happening. So that's what you will see. It never creeps into economic systems and result in destruction.
Viewers, we have a fair amount of questions to cover, so kindly stop sending in your questions for this episode. We will again be doing something similar, and we will be able to address your questions in that, or you can put the comments in YouTube in the comment section, and Sridharji, whenever he has time, might be able to answer you to some detail. Sridharji, I have about 10 more questions to go. Please consider allocating about 1 minute per question, sir, and I'm going to read the question out as quickly as possible. Krishna Vadlamani wants to know, do you think Missouri Senator's bill COVID-19 Origin Act 2021 will be implemented to find out the origin of the Wuhan virus?
No.
Deepak Pradhan wants to know, how do you see the diminishing support for Modi after COVID mismanagement?
Uh, Look, I think Modi has a tendency to, there's a perceptional tendency that he is losing momentum and losing value. Often he comes back stronger. This is historical precedence. Now, I'm not going to sit here and analyze and defend because 1 minute is what we have here. The data tells me this COVID problem in India is manageable and the data is not being revealed.
Next question. Why can't the government give free vaccination for all, like polio vaccine? Is it because of budget constraint? Arvind Prakash.
This is in India.
Yes, yes.
I mean, all I can say is that this probably is a budget constraint and should be addressed. Here in the United States, the vaccines are free. All of us. When I say free, don't get us wrong. We have already paid for it through our healthcare system. So our healthcare system, they offer it through our healthcare system. So which means money is getting piled up somewhere against payables or receivables in the government budget.
Vishant Nayak wants to know, Biden administration is blocking raw materials for vaccine to India. US warships are entering Indian waters. Is Biden wanting to sabotage Quad to impress China?
The same question has been asked. The same issue has been raised that US is doing something similar with many other partners. And what exactly is the motivation of Mr. Biden? Because it's very dangerous to predict Biden. If you have watched many of our shows, every day there is a flip-flop on what he said yesterday. So it's very dangerous to answer this question, but clearly on those two issues, exports as well as stopping the exports, as well as the incursion into the India's economic zone in the near Andaman Nicobar Islands is an unwarranted intrusion by Mr. Biden and the US forces.
Shubham Mishra wants to know, is Biden administration indifferent to Indian needs and just wants India to be on the front line in the great geopolitical games?
Can you repeat, please?
Yeah, what he wants to know, Shubham Mishra wants to know, is Biden administration indifferent to Indian needs and just wants India to be on the front line in the great geopolitical games? It is like we will lead from behind.
I don't think India is in the forefront. India's name, often these days don't get mentioned in any of the Biden's briefings. It is selectively used as appropriate, as you saw in the case of climate accord. Mr. John Kerry went to two specific countries. One is to India, and then from India he flew to China. And then he got back. What he did in China, we don't know, but certainly he got big support from Modi ji. And Modi ji came to the forefront. But Biden's press statement not even acknowledges that Modi is one of his prime kind of allies in the climate agenda.
Yes, indeed. It's like some of his messaging people are getting a lump in their throat, maybe. Sairam.
Bernie Sanders and Warren basically said, please support India on climate, please support India on TRIPS, which is this export-import issue, and support India and South Africa. Again, we covered this in the Daily Global Insights. It came from his senators, from the progressive side, not from him.
So viewers, lots of stuff is happening. Everybody is doing everything. That tugboat that the United States gets pulled in different directions sometimes. One wonders whether it's ever going to make forward progress. Sometimes it does make forward progress. So it's to understand this thing, you have to, kind of be in the habit of listening to DGI, because these are all stories. These are all threads. Every day a little bit more happens in every one of these things. So news is becoming, unfortunately, another soap opera, but we can't help it. That's how the governments want to act. So be it. So next one is from Sairam. The creator of blockchain technology had a vision of bypassing fiat currency. How viable is this?
this is a very interesting question. This is a this is a battle between regulators and how exactly these currency exchanges and the sovereign nations are going to deal with it. If a sovereign nation like China or Japan takes a position in terms of using the crypto for selective trade, then the fiat currency stays as is, as a parallel ecosystem. This is the reason why somebody asked a question, will it disrupt the world? Not disrupt the world, because they will not alter the existing monetary system. They will try to create an adjacent system as the first template for doing selective trades. But in the end, when you look at it on a net basis, the net basis, it's always linked to a currency. For example, China will say, I have in the monetary system X trillion yuan. I have 2 trillion yuan assigned outside of the fiat, which is in the crypto trading system, where I am trading with 6 countries using this. So that way they don't disrupt. So I mean, for foreseeable future, I see 2 systems. One is a crypto system for selective, and then you have the existing monetary system prevalent.
To add to your point, sir, since I have a little bit of fintech background, and this is going to be our last question, there are a couple more questions, but I think this is far too important, a point to not touch upon in a little bit more length. Now, think about your, take out your currency, whichever country you are in. Look at the words on there. It says the government or the central governor, he says, I promise to pay the bearer of this note a certain amount of money. That means the government of that country is standing behind to guarantee you that you will be paid that money, right? So crypto, unfortunately, does not have that asset backing. However, to try and assure people to get onto this crypto bandwagon, the China has backed its digital renminbi with gold. They are saying, look, gold was the best, most stable reference against which currency was issued up until 1973. So we will say that our cryptos are, they are the asset behind that is so much gold that we have in our wallets. So this is an attempt by China to try and give an apples for apples comparison, and this will perhaps be like Sridharji says, there will be 2 systems that will be going, and there will be also more ways in which this application might happen. For example, China gives aid to a corrupt nation that is drought hit, and then what they want to do is to want to make sure that the money goes for the right causes, not just at the government level, but when the government and to the consumer level. Guess what? Blockchain technology used in conjunction with this can ensure that. So sitting in Beijing, somebody can say, okay, it's 99% going for the purpose it is intended for. A lot of these things can be done. I think for such kind of applications, again, people will start using digital currency. I think there's a lot of goodness in this. Perhaps it can even curb money laundering. Although some might say, if a drug dealer pays for a painting in Bitcoin, is he not anonymizing himself? That question I'll let you answer, Sridharji, and that's it for today after that.
If you recall, in terms of the sequence of programs that would come in where crypto is used, is government to government is first. Then I said government to business is second. Then there may be within countries business to business rather than intra countries. Okay, so in other words, Tesla is paying its dealers in United States, dealers paying Tesla. In the moment you go into it as a trade currency or trade and commerce type of a currency, you will find the regulators step in
for all those things that you are alluding to, which is money laundering, security. Then here we have FinTrans. I don't know what the financial transactions type of an act. So it's a whole set of issues that will creep in. So you will see a progressive evolution of the crypto, but restricted to certain transactional categories, which delivers the big bang for the buck. So JP Morgan wants to settle HSBC for pounds with dollars. It'll happen. JP Morgan wants to settle UOB or somebody in Singapore. It could happen because there's no money laundering in that. There is no criminal activity in that. It's an aggregate value settlement which can happen without creating either a Herstat risk or any of this kind of systemic risk with a stable kind of a currency unit, which is the crypto. So I don't see this creeping into the transactions which fall where the regulators will step in, which wanders into these territories of money laundering, etc.
And viewers, with that, we bring to close today's What This Week Was. And we request you to subscribe to our channel, join our membership program. And in the making of this, Sridharji and I spent several hours preparing, referencing the material to make sure that it is as accurate as possible. So we really appreciate it when you refer us to your family and friends, and also perhaps think about donating to our cause. If not, if you're in India, you can join membership. It's very inexpensive, and that helps us sustain our resources to continue to give you this kind of high quality programming. Once again, thank you, namaskaram, and hope to see you again on Monday again, Sridharji.
Indeed, and have a wonderful weekend. And for you in India, it is a wonderful night. And then for us, we have it's still 3 hours for Mr. Sreeji, so he has a good day ahead of him. We are in the early afternoon here, so we look forward to a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar.